Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the fit for this video is my Data Over Dogma baseball shirt. Let's take a look at a follow-up response to my response yesterday about my video on Genesis 2:17. And every last occurrence refers specifically to literal physical death.
So what this author is doing right now is a fallacy called begging the question. He is assuming that the conclusion of the word death in every other occurrence means a physical death. But let's forget that. Let's grant that the word death means an actual physical death.
So again, this is a straw man. I was quite emphatic in my video yesterday about not addressing the word death or the generic concept of death. I was talking about a very specific paronomastic infinitive construction that used the verbal root to die. In fact, so concerned was I with clarifying that I was not talking about the word death that I said this: the word death does not occur in Genesis 2:17. They're trying to leverage other context to overrule the context of Genesis 2:17, which has been completely ignored throughout the entire video.
Now here he says that I am ignoring the context of Genesis 2.
Another straw man. I did not say Genesis 2, I said Genesis 2:17. You did not address that context a single time in that video, and you don't address it a single time in this video either, because you can't.
I want to show you guys that he's actually ignoring the context of Genesis entirely. Now to get a good context of Genesis 2, let's take a look at Genesis 1 to see what God uses the word day to mean.
So two problems here. The first is that this is presupposing univocality, because the absolutely overwhelming academic consensus is that Genesis 1 is a separate text from Genesis 2 and 3. It was written later by different people for different reasons and is actually intended to replace and supersede Genesis 2 and 3. It's telling an entirely different creation story. So no, it does not establish context for Genesis 2:17. The other issue is that this creator is again retreating to just the concept of day here. And this, again, flatly ignores the specific linguistic argument that I made regarding the use of the inseparable prefix "b" with the word day in introducing a temporal clause that describes the context for an action and its consequence. And so there's a whole syntactical and grammatical package that I was talking about as establishing the intended meaning. So if we just ignore all of that and go back to the generic concept of day, we're doing the exact same thing that I criticized in my original video.
Starting off with Genesis chapter 1 verse 5. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Notice how he says evening and morning. There is one full day there.
So this is inaccurate, and it starts with a bad translation. The Hebrew absolutely does not say, so evening and morning were the first day. It says, and there was evening and there was morning, day one. And so it is a report marking the transition out of day one and into day two.
Now, in Genesis chapter 2, what day would this be in? Well, this would be in the seventh day.
So again, we're presupposing univocality. Genesis 2 and 3 were the earlier, originally distinct creation account that describes creation as taking place on a single day. It begins in the second half of Genesis 2, verse 4, where it says, Bayom asot Adonai Elohim eretz v'shamayim, or on the day that Adonai Elohim made earth and heavens, and then goes on to describe that creative act which all took place within a single 24-hour period. Now, when you force Genesis 2 and 3 to agree with Genesis 1, you have to find a way to reconcile a one-day creative period with a 7-day creative period, which is what this creator is doing.
And I want to show you guys something interesting about the seventh day. You will never find in the seventh day that God calls the seventh day evening and morning, completing the seventh day.
Because the report is complete and there is no need to transition into the next day. This is part of what established the 7-day week, so it's a cycle, so it would just start back over.
So according to the very context of Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, the seventh day hasn't even ended yet. The seventh day is still occurring today. Now, what does this mean for Adam and Eve? Well, it simply means that when God commanded that they would die in that day, well, guess what? They were in the seventh day. So no matter when they died, as long as the seventh day has not ended yet, as you cannot see within the text that it has ended, then he did not lie.
So not only is this not the context of Genesis 2:17, but this is an absolutely laughable misinterpretation of how the priestly creation report ends.
Now let's just go one step further in the context of Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 2 verse 4, it says, "This is the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day," the same exact word that is used in Genesis 2:17, "that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens." Now, even if we assume that a day is a 24-hour period, according to the context of Genesis chapter 1, the earth and the heavens were not even made in the same 24-hour period. So for it now to say, in the 24-hour period, that God made the heavens and the earth, even though it wasn't made in a singular 24-hour period, it would have been made in two, just shows that that word is not meaning in the 24-hour period that it was made.
So this creator is obviously entirely ignorant of the fact that they're presupposing univocality, but is obviously also too dogmatic to think critically about that. This creator is entirely ignorant of the absolutely overwhelming academic consensus regarding the independent compositions of these two different creation accounts, but again is also obviously too dogmatic to think that needs to be taken seriously. And this creator clearly does not know Hebrew, but is again also obviously too dogmatic to think it matters. So this is a train wreck of an argument, and I would recommend to this creator that they actually go learn these languages before you start arguing about what they do and do not mean.